Hey everybody, welcome to week 10. We have made it to double digits, so I don't know, it's always a weird thing to me, something I look forward to, but we're there. You're doing great, we are carrying on. And so just, I've been preaching a lot of the same things every week, right? You know, you're pros by now. You know what you need to do with your discussions and replies. You know what you need to do with your reflections and observations. So just keep focusing on that. Keep doing good work. Keep thinking about what you're learning and how it all applies and connects to everything else. I do want to bring out something, and I slowly I realize I'm editing these things. There seems to be sometimes confusion when I say current music scene. And by current music scene, I mean what's going on right now that's popular. So I know that even that can be weird. Last night, I hopped in the car to run out, and I don't remember what station it was on, but Guns N' Roses came on, Sweet Child of Mine, right? That song came out in 1987. So you're looking at a song that's been out for decades. That is not the current music scene. What I want, when I say current music scene, is say within the last year or two. Maybe we'll give it that. And if you're not sure what's popular, sometimes I get students that are like, I don't really know what's popular right now. There are ways to find out. You can find out on YouTube. You can go on Spotify. Go on Spotify and look at the top charts, top 20, top 50, whatever. You can see what's going on out there and figure out. And I think that's probably the best one. I mean, there's Apple Music and there's Amazon and all of that. But I think that that's probably one of the best ways to find out what's going on. And then just think about the things that you hear about. But if you're not sure, then do a little digging, do a little research. I'll give you an example. So in the coming weeks, you're going to learn about punk rock. And so I will, I'll maybe ask about punk rock. I do this a lot and say what current punk bands or whatever. You'd be amazed at how many times I get Green Day mentioned. Green Day has been around for a long time, right? Again, decades. I think that we're at 30 years, right? 91, 11, 12, yeah, 30 years, thereabouts. Or, late 80s, early 90s, right? So 30 years. So current means current. There are current things. I'm gonna tell you this right now. Whenever I say, is there anything current that ... there is always something current that ... So if you say, no, I don't think there is. You just got to go, look, this is part of the idea too. We're not just looking backwards in time, but we're looking at, hey, what else is going around us? Because that's the perspective that you want to get. Does that make sense? So think about, just stretching out a little bit to be aware of what's going on out there. If you aren't sure, ask your friends. Ask if you have younger siblings. I've got younger sons and daughter. They're not young, but still, they'll give me a sense of other things that are going on. And then I'll go on and listen. I'll put on certain playlists just to see what's going on and what's happening out there. So I highly recommend that you do that. So if you remember last week, I was talking about how we're going to start going into different new genres spinning out of rock and roll. So all the past stuff. We get to rock and roll in the 50s. And, one of the things about rock and roll in the 50s, you're going to get a question talking about, the role of the electric guitar. So I want you to think about B.B. King and Lightning Hopkins, into Chuck Berry, into, Hendrix, into other people. You're going to be learning about these people. Think about that thread through. So if I say from the 50s until now, or the 60s till now, I don't need an exhaustive history of it, but you can pick out a few points. Well, in the 50s, and there was these people. And then in the 60s, there were these people. And then eventually, you're going to get Eric Clapton and Jimmy Page and folks like that. You've learned about Pete Townsend. There's a lot to draw from. I don't want you to go do, look up articles on it. Everything that you need to know to do these assignments. So when you see that, think about that. Also, you're going to be asked about, you're going to be learning about hard rock and heavy metal. And you're going to be asked about the progression from rock and roll to hard rock and heavy metal. And some of it's related to those people I just mentioned. And so it's not difficult, but it's going to just require some thought. And that's really where I'm pushing things, is that I want you to think about all the things that you're learning and think about how all those things go together. So when you learn about hard rock and heavy metal, one of the things that you're going to learn is, again, what do I keep saying? Nothing exists in a vacuum. So when you go back to Rumble by Link Wray in the late 50s, when you go back to You Really Got Me, which we learned about with the Kinks in the British Invasion, You Really Got Me really provided the foundation for hard rock and heavy metal. You had songs that were guitar driven, that were based on power chords, riffs instead of chord progressions. You had electric bass doubling the electric guitar. You had a heavier drum beat. In some cases, you had bands that had two kick drums, kick drum, bass drums. And so you're gonna learn about that foundation, and then out of the music of the Kinks that provides the blueprint, you're gonna get there's gonna be some other bands that are mentioned in there, and you're gonna man, I'm just like totally blanking on the like Steppenwolf, Born to Be Wild. There we go, and then you're gonna get to Led Zeppelin, and to me, Led Zeppelin is so important as a band in so many ways, with so many great songs. Now, granted, they had questionable ethics. They were not, it was not unusual for them to take songs by other people and claim it at themselves. Dazed and Confused is a perfect example, but there are many others. You can hunt them down on YouTube and find that. I'm not going to go into that whole thing. There might be a little bit of it in there, but that's a whole other track that you could go. But even then, what you have is an amazing band, and it's important to understand with Led Zeppelin that they were really like one of those early super groups. So you had, someone like Jimmy Page, who was a session musician. You had John Paul Jones on bass and keyboards, who was a session musician, could read and write music and could make arrangements. You have John Bonham, this amazing, powerful drummer who had jazz foundations as well. And then you had this great singer in Robert Plant that had sung with bands and was influenced by most everybody that he heard, Arthur Crudup and Elvis Presley and all of these people. And what you had really was an amazing group that came together with amazing songs, right? But a couple things to understand about them. One, they were not liked by the critics in the beginning. And that's always an interesting thing to think about. We don't often know until 10, 20 years down the line, if we're lucky 5, who really is going to have the impact. So Led Zeppelin developed an audience, but the critics really didn't like them. They didn't like that they were taking the American blues and folk and other things and then pushing it into new directions. They weren't really widely received. They did have a popular audience. And Led Zeppelin is one of those bands, now that we're into the late 60s and early 70s, we've talked a little bit about the FM radio and the importance of FM radio in the music scene. I might not have gone into it a whole lot before, but you read about it if you got through all the modules. And so with FM radio, there are artists that we never would have really heard about. We wouldn't know who probably Santana and the Grateful Dead, most of the Doors songs, maybe a few would have made it on AM radio. Led Zeppelin was one of those bands that never would have made it if there was only AM radio. So the impact of FM radio is really profound. And the thing with Led Zeppelin is that they really provided the foundation for hard rock and heavy metal. You may be asked, is there a difference between hard rock and heavy metal? I'm going to say that there is, but I want to know what you think about it. Don't look it up. Listen to the music, read the materials, and then you decide, is there a difference between these two styles? And if so, what are they? Doesn't have to be exhaustive. And always understand that there are always gray areas. So I'm not going to go into details because then I would otherwise be telling you the answer. And I don't want to do that. I want you to think about those aspects. When you think about those hard rock bands and heavy metal bands, when you look at those hard rock bands and those heavy metal bands, when you think about what they're singing about and how they're playing and what they're doing, that will give you all the information that you need. Now, I'm really focused, as I've said, on the foundations with a lot of these genres. So this chapter really takes us into the late 70s mostly, and there's a really significant game changer in 1978 with Eddie Van Halen. When Eddie Van Halen comes on the scene, he is a huge game changer in rock music and particularly in guitar music. So you have Clapton, but then you really have Hendrix. And Hendrix, again, didn't exist in a vacuum. He was influenced by Jeff Beck and by other musicians, blues musicians. But Hendrix upped the game, and then Eddie upped it even more. So you're going to learn about that. We're not going to get into this stuff with like speed metal and thrash metal. That comes later. By the time you get into the 80s, really. So that'll come in a different chapter. So I think that's it. I've dropped some questions in here for you, and do good work. You can do everything that you need with the materials that you have. So take the time, go through them. It's just one chapter this time. And watch the videos, get the sounds of these things in your ears. They're definitely early heavy metal, especially if you think of bands like Judas Priest and folks like that. You're going to, of course, learn about Black Sabbath, which really like Led Zeppelin created the blueprint for hard rock and heavy metal. And then when you take that heavy metal thread, you go certainly into Black Sabbath, right? That is like right there, foundation, and then into Judas Priest. And then you're also going to learn, this is another interesting thing about this, is to think about that really for the first time we've studied American music and then British music, and a lot of the music in this chapter is going to be British, not all of it, but a lot of it. But then we're going to start to move internationally. So you're going to learn about AC/DC, who is from Australia by way of Scotland. You're going to learn about the Scorpions, who are from Germany, and you're going to learn about other British bands, Iron Maiden and Def Leppard. You're going to learn about American bands. You're going to learn about Alice Cooper and other folks like that. So perfect time of year as we move into the Halloween week. Is a great time to be picking up this particular subject matter, because some of it does get dark, and so maybe that's one of the differences that are in there too, is again, what's that subject matter when it's dealing with what's being sung about. That's it. That's all I'm going to tell you. Have a great week, and we will talk more soon. Bye.